Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, wherever you may be. Welcome to episode number 7 of All About Nothing. Thanks for coming. And as I listen to the news, which I want to remind you to not do too much of, and I'm hearing all this terrible news. And being here in California, of course, the updates about the big fires in Southern California are so devastating and so constant. And it's like a daily reminder of all the tragedy that's going on around us and all the new trauma, all the new people without homes and without belongings and without any place to go and more disenfranchised, orphaned, and widowed and traumatized people. It's devastating. So do be reminded not to listen too much. And what I'm interested by, and I was noticing this morning when I was listening, was that there's a lot more mention of mental health than there used to be. And the way it's being talked about, it's not only in terms of physical and material devastation, but also about trauma. You're hearing a lot about what the impact, the emotional impact is on people, even when they don't lose their own homes or their own family members. Being surrounded by loss, it activates so much memory and so much important empathy between people. And so I was thinking about what to talk about with you this week. And I thought, well, maybe I'll talk about something that I'm certainly learning a lot about, particularly these days when I'm going through my, albeit temporary, experience of some level of disability, which is humbling and very frustrating and sometimes infuriating to me, and sometimes completely unnerves and dysregulates me. And so, what I want to talk to you about is probably what's most difficult for anyone with neglect in their background, trauma and neglect, the trauma of neglect, but most specifically, neglect. And that is the whole large category of social support and the very essential impact of attachment and connection and interpersonal experience of love and presence and experiencing somebody as there. So it took me back all the way to when I first came into this field. And that was before many of you were born, way back in the 1980s, when our one sort of most cherished text, probably one of the few really good books that we had, which has stood the test of time, is Trauma and Recovery by Judith Herman. And those of you who are younger and newer to the trauma field, it's stood the test of time beautifully. And I believe Dr. Herman is quite elderly, although she is still living. I think she's not terribly healthy, but it is a wonderful book. And one of the things that she talks about, and this is well before we had any of the body therapies, any of the nonverbal therapies, or not much, we had some very sort of fringy body therapies or things that were not respected that much. But the body therapies as we know them now and the alternatives or the modalities that are in addition to talk, we didn't have then. But what Dr. Herman identified then, which is still true, is the importance of connection. And she worked a lot with women who had been sexually abused as children, and she talked about the power of support groups and how much the survivors helped each other with the empathy, with the understanding, with the support, with the seeing that they were not unique, that they were not alone, that they were not to blame, all of which are floridly potent issues with neglect. So I want to sort of roll it back a little bit. And even though many of you have heard me speak before and have heard me talk about the origins of neglect before, I want to review, and it always is worth reviewing, the heart of neglect trauma, which is the my undying refrain, the dilemma without solution. And it really is worth hearing this over and over and over again because of how it shows itself over and over again in ourselves and in our clients if we're therapists, which I know that many of you are. In fact, many of you, like myself, are both. So the dilemma is as follows. And it goes back to infancy when we are most vulnerable and when we are most essentially responsive and in a high, steep stage of development, brain development. Because as you know, the human infant, the brain is highly underdeveloped when we're first born. And much of the development of the brain happens in the first months and years of life. And so roll it back all the way to infancy. And as we know, and if you don't remember it, I want to make sure that it's emblazoned on your sort of learning memory, which is attachment is a survival need. The infant desperately needs the other as much as we need water, food, oxygen, warmth, physical safety from danger. We need the attachment as much as those. It is a survival need, which is why neglect trauma is so very essential. And I view it as the single most potent source of trauma because it strikes when we are most vulnerable, both developmentally, as far as where we are in the process of growing our capacities, as well as our physiology to live in the world, but also in terms of our being these fragile little beings which have no means to protect and take care of ourselves. So, holding in mind that the attachment to other is on the order of survival, when the infant experiences the mother as dysregulated, as absent, as angry or scared or depressed or even blank. And many of you have seen the still face videos, which if you haven't, go to YouTube and look up Edtronic still face videos because it is so powerful and impressive to see how this little being, this little toddler, reacts so violently simply by the mother's going expressionless, let alone in our cases of neglect where the mother is either withdrawn or lost. Like, imagine the many cases that we hear about every day in these war situations where the mother is killed, let alone if the child views the mother being killed. But if the mother is lost to the child, or if the mother withdraws from the child, or if the mother is simply absent, that child experiences lethal terror. That child feels like it's going to die. I can't emphasize this enough. I'm not being dramatic here. This is the experience of lethal terror for this little being who has no defenses. This child can cry, but it can't fight, can't flee, can't do anything but maybe freeze, collapse, and die. So that is many of us in these early stages of life. Now, couple that with the fact that this person who is withdrawn, absent, lost, unreliable, is the most needed, most wanted, most cherished person in the world to that infant at that time. And this is true for all mammals. The experience of that child is, this is the person I most long for in the world. So the dilemma is as follows. The source of terror, lethal terror, and the source of longing, the person I want and need the most, it's the same person. So the dilemma is, I'm reaching, I'm withdrawing, I'm reaching. Well, it's the back and forth, and the child can't resolve it. And ultimately, they collapse, which is the early seeds of the three P's, of course, the collapse, the freeze response, because there is nothing else to be done except for exhausted, give up. And many of us know that feeling all too well. So this child gets a little older, and it's many of us. And that child discovers, and I speak from experience, as many of you do also, self-reliance. I'll do it all myself. And then no one can let me down. I won't lose anyone. I won't be abandoned. Nobody's erratic presence is going to undo me and dysregulate me. I'll just be the rock of Gibraltar. And many of us, certainly myself, that's been our adaptation. So we've become extremely successful, extremely strong. Many of us are athletes. Many of us are endurance athletes. Many of us are extremely good at something. Many of us are caretakers of other because we don't need anything, or we disavow interpersonal need, which is why when something happens, and you know what? It does. When something happens and we do need help, then we're forced to confront this dilemma in new ways. And frankly, when I came upon this injury, it wasn't the very start of my undertaking the journey to learn with humility and grace to accept the fact that I'm no different than anybody else. And there's a lot of grandiosity in imagining that I am, that I don't need other, that I don't need food, that I don't need sleep, that I don't need rest, breaks, time to myself. I don't need any of that because I'm this powerhouse of self reliance. And in many of our cultures, certainly in Western cultures, certainly in the US and in Europe, we are very familiar with this myth of independence being a good thing and not needing anyone or anything as being a good thing until we do. And there's no way around it. And then what? Well, then we're humbled by the fact that we have to learn. We have to learn to turn to and accept and receive with grace the help of others. And one of the, actually, as with all of my untoward experiences and every bit of trauma that comes my way, including the worst things I've ever been through, what I've learned is everything I experience, even the worst things I experience, serve me because I learn so much. And there's more that I can tell you so that maybe you don't have to fall down, get up, and learn from, rough experience the way I do. And learning from experience even is a developmental act of maturity. Learning from experience is something that, with good fortune and with grace and humility and with, good equipment, we can do. And thankfully, I'm learning a lot from this experience. And one of them is not only to accept, but to ask for, have the humility and the grace and the gratitude to ask for, and then graciously accept the help of others. Because what Judy Herman taught us way back in the 1980s, when we first started talking about trauma, was that it is probably even now the most potent resource we have. And when people are in the midst of war and famine and fires and floods and snow and all the things that we've heard about or that we are daily brushed by every day if we don't regulate our news listening too much. And that is that it's an ongoing experience in this sorry world. And so the more we can learn to band together and do what is our birthright, which is to work together, the sooner and the better and the more peacefully and graciously we progress and maybe even heal. And even this very frustrating experience that I'm in now is so invaluable to me because I'm not only learning up here, but I'm learning here what it means to accept, to receive, to tolerate the help of others. That, I'm not that powerful and I do need, and I am so grateful for what I get. And my relationship with my husband, and I'm so grateful to have such a blessed partner, is a daily reminder because with all of this neglect of his story, and his story is a miserable story of neglect and loss, that his being received in his desire to help me, additionally, not only to healing my injury of needing other, it heals his injury of needing other because he gets to see and feel and know more about how powerful is the experience of being able to provide that support, which is much needed. And going back to Judy Herman's therapy groups, which we learned about in the 1980s, it is probably the most potent source of healing for trauma survivors. And what I learned from my men's group that I had from 1998 until 2016, 18 years, is where I first learned about neglect. And these men who didn't even know that they had a story, how much they helped each other, and how much they learned about interpersonal connection and need and reliance on other. I'll say one last thing as I close, and that is it is nature's design. And many of us know this from experience, even though you may not have heard it. And I'm just actually aware that you can see my little armband, which I've kept on to keep myself mindful. In the ER, they put this little band on me that says fall risk. And fall risk means careful because my balance is messed up, that I could fall. So I have to constantly be reminded of my interpersonal need. But what I was going to tell you is the following. Nature's design is that we mammals, and I don't only mean humans now, I mean all mammals. We mammals are hardwired for interpersonal need. And that means that we are wired for interdependence. So when we do an act of service to other, we get a dopamine surge in our own brain. I get a reward from helping you. And I know this every single day, including now as we speak, as I speak, and you, whoever you are, wherever you are, you listen. And I have learned through my long, hard road of neglect that, you know what? There is someone out there. Somebody is listening, and it's you. And we're all in this together, even if I don't see you, even if I don't hear you, even if I can't touch you right now. I have the experience when I give something to other that I experience a very immediate physiological divorce, reward, not divorce, reward, certainly not divorce. So, reward is what I'm saying to you. So, I get rewarded for helping other, and you get rewarded for helping other. What a great arrangement, as I always say to my husband, and he always says to me, when we realize how much we're both getting. And that is true in all truly empathic exchanges. There is a reward, endogenous opioids, those internal opiates in our own brain that are nature's design. So, what I leave you with, and I'm actually very grateful, but not all the time. Sometimes I'm so angry and so frustrated and so beside myself with dysregulation. But in this moment and in my better moments, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for this injury and I'm grateful for you. So pass it on and thank you for listening. Remember, our experience of nothing is not nothing. Nothing matters. You matter, and even if I don't know you, you matter to me because even in this wild, generic sense, I get rewarded. So I leave you with that. Be safe, be well, be warm, be dry, take care of each other, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.